finally, a source of raw, real, and honest information on healthcare issues that matter most. Welcome to BS Free MD. From the latest medical information to how to stay sane as a doctor or a patient, no subject is taboo, no BS is allowed. Now, let's welcome your hosts, Doctors May and Tim Hindmarsh.
Hey everybody, welcome back to another episode of BS Free MD with your duo co-hosts, Doctors Tim and May Hindmarsh. So happy to have you back. And if this is your first time joining us, welcome. This week, we are talking about something that crosses the boundaries of specialists in healthcare. We have a guest physician with us who's an endocrinologist who is talking about ketogenic diet to treat diabetes. And she is a pioneer in her field, as I'm sure if you've ever dealt with any specialists in diabetes, you would probably recognize. Dr. Mariela Glandt comes to us this week as a Harvard and Columbia trained physician with more than 20 years experience in treating metabolic disease. She is the co-founder of ONA Health. I love that name, a virtual diabetes clinic that combines optimal medicine, nutrition, science, technology, and behavioral therapy in order to reverse type 2 diabetes. She is the director of Glandt Center for Diabetes Care in Tel Aviv, and a multidisciplinary clinic it is that uses ketogenic diets as the main tool for treatment of diabetes. It was a need that arose from her practice that she quickly realized, and she co-founded Eat Sane, a company that makes low-carb foods with no artificial sweeteners. She's also the co-founder of Metabolics, a nonprofit organization in Israel that aims to educate people to help them achieve optimal metabolic health. We had a great discussion with her, and she does a great job at explaining the physiology of insulin and how it impacts your body and does all the horrific things. So check out our interview that we recorded with her.
Here we go with Dr. Mariela Glandt, kind of a unicorn, an endocrinologist. I can't even say it. It's like I haven't even been drinking yet. Who actually believes in using low carb diets as a treatment for diabetes, which is like, that is really awesome. So welcome, Dr. Glandt, to BS Free MD. We are so privileged to have you with us.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm excited to be here. It's great.
So
It's great
this
what
is
you're
exciting
doing.
and
Good stuff.
You're coming to us from the other part of the world in an undisclosed location. But that's the beauty of medicine and, the internet now. We can do these meetings and actually even healthcare from abroad, which is what you're doing. So we're really excited, as Tim said, to have an endocrinologist speak to low carb diet and how diabetics can actually change their life, reverse their diabetes, get off their medications, and cure their diabetes. And that is not the norm, as we know, and sounds like you are experiencing as well amongst your colleagues. Why don't you, first off, just give our listeners your own little bit of your background, where you did your training, your endocrinology residency, any fellowships, and where you're at today.
Sure. So I'm originally from Argentina, so that's where the Spanish comes from. And I moved to the U.S. when I was 10, and trained in a very traditional system. I did my residency in Boston at Beth Israel Deaconess at Harvard. Then I went to Columbia for fellowship, and oops.
No problem.
Sorry about that. I thought that was off. Oops. Should I do that again? One sec. Let's see. Okay. So I went to Beth Israel I'm starting this part over. Okay. So I did my fellowship. I did my residency at Beth Israel Deaconess in Boston, at Harvard, and then I did my fellowship at Columbia. And then I worked in New York, and I worked in the Bronx. I worked in the Upper East Side. I had that combination. Then I ended up moving to Israel, where I worked again in the conventional and in diabetes. I was running diabetes clinical trials, many trials. It was a very very prolific center for diabetes trials for 2 years. Anyway, long stories, but in the end, I was very lucky to start a diabetes center on my own, because I realized how much freedom in retrospect that gave me, because I didn't have anybody telling me what I could and could not do. And so by chance, once I saw this wealth of data and an overwhelming understanding that this is the way we should be treating diabetes, I didn't have anybody saying, hey, you can't do that, because I was my own boss, and that gave me a lot of freedom. So that was really why I was able to start implementing these changes. So this is why I'm a little bit of a weird bird. Not that many endocrinologists are totally on their own like this. I was kind of a mushroom in Israel, working by myself at this point. And I because my Hebrew was so bad, I didn't join the normal system. And this is kind of
fascinating.
Worked in my favor in the end.
Basically, what you're saying is that your training that you did in the US was pretty traditional, conventional. There was no, I'm assuming, no trend to, hey, let's try low carb diet to manage this. No, I mean, Tim and I talk about it all the time. I think on previous podcasts talked about how, well, I remember Tim getting out to the dietitians here locally years ago, like 10, 15 years ago or more, saying, what are we doing pushing all these carbohydrates on diabetics and then adding insulin? It's like, right.
Well, right. It's like
and something doesn't compute.
So that's how you were trained as well. And then what did something happen when you started your own practice then over there that you noticed happening? Was it patient anecdotal evidence? Was it somebody self-reported this? How did you sort of change?
Yeah, I had a bunch of things happen at the same time. First of all, just regarding my training, one thing I'll never forget was that I heard I had an attending telling me how insulin makes things grow, and even in blood vessels. And if you want to make a tumor grow, you add insulin. And then we walked into a patient's room, and then we prescribed insulin 4 times a day. Long acting and 3 shots. Like no connection between basic science and our clinical world, right? And once I had a couple of things happen at once. One of my best friends, she's a really smart cookie, and she figured this out way. She's not a doctor; she knows more than most doctors. I mean, I hope I'm not insulting anybody. She's just really, really smart. She does a ton of research always. And anyway, she's the one I really owe her for this, because she pulled me into it. And at many levels, I was like, yeah, of course it makes sense. And I always told patients to eat less rice, etc. when I was working in the Bronx, especially, and definitely drop the Coke and the obvious stuff. But there's a real big leap between understanding that maybe carbs raise your sugar and you shouldn't be doing that, and to becoming a low carb doctor, which is a completely different ballgame, because there's so many different layers to understand. Because really what happens is that you start to understand that we got it wrong on a lot of different things, a lot of different levels. It's like a house of cards. So they all kind of start to fall and so it shakes your world a lot. It's not just, hey, drop the rice. There's a whole world behind this, about the pathophysiology of the disease, like what's the root cause here. So it's a real big revolution once you start to get it. It's not just decrease the carbs a bit. There's a big difference between low carb ketogenic diets and the low drop the Coke.
I mean, a little bit of research and reading that I've been doing over the last year, and I really got actually into Dr. James DiNicolantonio, who's a
he's a
physiologist.
He's
a physiologist, and did a lot of work in cardiovascular health. Who has co-written the Obesity Fix and the Salt Fix, but talking about the importance that you need salt actually in your diet. But
yeah, is it the
yes,
one that did
yes.
he write a book with Jason
But
Fung? I think he did.
Talking about the importance of not just decreasing the unhealthy high fructose corn syrups. You're right, like in Coke, on those refined carbs, but even all types, because of what insulin does to hormones to stimulate aging and cortisol and inflammation and cardiovascular disease as well. And so that you're right, there's so many pieces and layers, then it all you're right, you pull that pin and then there's so many other factors. Right.
The whole thing crumbles. Yes. Yes. So yes, if as you mentioned, the salt is one of them, right? Like everybody is trying to, they think hypertension salt. Well, that's yet another one of these myths that we need to debunk, right? So we understand that it's insulin is behind that.
Yes,
as well.
And actually,
so
that's what
insulin
he
is like
talks
an
about
octopus.
in his book. And I was fascinated. I'm like, that makes so much more sense. Going back in my brain to all the physiology that we learned in pre-med, I'm like, well, this just seems so obvious that how come in mainstream medicine we just seem to push it? But I mean, he blames it all on the Cardiovascular Society and the pharma
they've all been, all of those societies for the large part have been captured by big pharma. It's pretty obvious.
So how much of this is captured by big pharma, would you say, as far as the push for the carbohydrate as the basis for feeding diabetics and then adding on insulin and medications? Is there a big push from the pharmaceutical industry to change the narrative in research, do you think? Or like, why is it we have so many smart doctors?
No, May. I'm sorry. I don't mean to answer for you. But I used to do I do action sports, and I used to do this decathlon where I skydive and barefoot water ski and do a bunch of stupid stuff and raise money for our diabetic education system for our local hospital.
Oh wow.
And you talk to the diabetic educators, and then you see how the diabetic educators were educated. And Pfizer or whoever, I think Pfizer or Lilly that makes Lantus, I guess it's Lilly, they'd come in and they just buy all the dietitians and the diabetic nurse educators lunch and explain to them how they need Lantus, because Lantus is way better than the older insulins that we have, et cetera, et cetera. None of this is backed up with any real evidence. There's reams of data that you can use, the cheapo beef pork insulin. You don't have to have human insulin, et cetera, et cetera. But that's what would happen. It's bought and paid for. And now it's a million times worse, because instead of just selling insulin, which insulin to a type 2 diabetic, in my opinion, is like curing a hangover with whiskey. It works. Yeah, it works. Well, you're obviously a genius. So it works. It works for a little while, and then you need more whiskey. And meanwhile, your liver is trying to kill you. So it just never ceases to amaze me. Like, I get it now. Now what do we have? Now we have all of these peptides, these novel peptides that we're injecting people with. Instead of saying you can be on a very calorie restricted diet, you can get into ketosis, you can start to exercise, you can change your life, you can look better, you can feel better, you can sleep better, you can have a better mood. All of the side effects of this diet are super positive, but it's a little bit challenging to get to. Just like, it's kind of hard to put the bottle down when you're used to drinking half a liter of Jack Daniels every day. But that's the only thing that's going to save your life. Instead, take Ozempic, take, all of these different peptides. And we've gone from metformin, which is a pretty good drug and fairly inexpensive, to these massively expensive injectables, because they're going to be the magic weight loss. And honestly, like I want my head my head is going to explode, because there's no common sense.
Right. No, it's getting crazier and crazier, right? It's because we're doing nothing to stop this epidemic, and it's not going to get any better. And the more junk we eat, and the more there's a real issue here with consumerism at the base of this, right? So it's an insane, it's a train wreck. And fortunately, there is a growing movement of people that are interested in learning. It's really a movement by the people that is coming to the doctors and saying, hey, we want answers. We don't want to be sick. So I think there is some positive energy there going against pharma. To answer your question, pharma is there's no conference that can happen without pharma. There is almost no education that happens without pharma. So it's very difficult. Their job is to make money, and that's totally fine. That's their job. Our job is a little different because we signed a Hippocratic oath and we have a responsibility. And I think that we can't really blame the doctors, because it's, when I found out, and I don't know, I haven't backed this up with the actual source, but that Harrison's has 200 donate, 200 different people have contributed, like payers to Harrison's, which you think is like the most pure book that you could imagine, right? Or you would think, right? So this is like the Bible of internal medicine. And when you hear that, I don't know, I haven't read exactly where the money is coming from, but I lost a lot of.
One of the
I was
title
very
authors
sad
is
to hear
Anthony
that.
Fauci. Sorry, I just had to bring that in.
Yes.
We have an old Harrison's textbook
really?
still. It might actually be back on that shelf, and you can pull it, and it's like literally one of the title authors is Anthony Fauci, who has never really ever practiced medicine. People don't understand that. You could be a great theoretician and write a book about whatever, but he's never, write a book about internal medicine, but he's never seen patients.
Wow.
He finished his residency, and then to escape Vietnam, he went into research and got into the NIH initially, and then to the NIAID. So he never had a practice, but that's a bunny trail.
Yeah, there you're bunny trailing, but to your point, you're right. In every aspect, pharma is everywhere, and we were blindsided in our careers. We kind of, had these drug reps would come in, talked about the newest medications. We trusted and believed what they said. We thought we were literally partnering together for the good of the patient. As we've gotten older and started questioning things and, scratching our heads and like, oh, this doesn't make sense. Now I feel like slapping a few colleagues in the face and like, hello, wake up. Like, this doesn't make sense. And why do you just kind of follow the mainstream narrative when, clearly it's a business. They're in it for money. And now sometimes I just think it's totally evil when certain things are happening with pharma and what's happening to patients. So, well, how do you, I guess I want to know with you. So it was really a light bulb, not a light bulb moment, but one of your best friends really convinced you, hey, take a deeper look at this. And did you start implementing changes with patients then to see what happened, or what happened?
Yeah, then I don't know if you ran into the How to Reverse Diabetes by Ignoring the Guidelines by Sarah Hallberg. I really recommend you see this. It's a TED Talk that's really, really hit me. Like, wow. She was, unfortunately, she passed away. She was a true inspiration to me. And I think, after seeing her video, I was like, oh my God, there's something here. And then I just started reading like crazy. I went nuts, when you see this and you're like, oh my God, what's going on here? Like your whole world is shaking, and you read and read and read and read and read, and then understand that there's a different way of doing this. And again, it's not like it's, I don't really even see it like as a conspiracy theory. I think, sometimes we need meds, and that's fine, but we're going to need, we do need these things because people by now are so sick. And so we have to depend a lot on these medications. But the issue is that that should not be, the first line of treatment. When we say, when you look at the guidelines and we spend literally half a second talking about diet and exercise, at the top of the guideline, nobody even looks at that. And that's really the main treatment. That's where it's at. It's the, let food be thy medicine. It's really true, because I never paid attention to food. I never cared about food. I personally have been lucky and never had to diet in my life. Never cared about anything related to food. Sent it to the dietitian, end of story. Well, before I started getting into this, I had to try it myself. And now, I've been eating this way for almost 8 years, and I really have become the biggest proponent of treating yourself with food, and many other things, nature, you know, uh, sun, etc. Many other things that are, critical to health, touch, going outside, etc. Basic things of coming back to who are we, what our roots are, as Homo sapiens. So I think it's been a revolution once
So
once you start going down
I'm
that path.
excited for you to share
It's
with everyone, when you say eating this way, exactly what that entails. Does it mean complete keto, like no carbs at all, some percentage of carbs? And what do you advise patients? And how do you also, the second part would be, how do you explain to patients how this will help their diabetes or why it's better for their body? I mean, do you actually sort of give them a little physiology lesson in how it's going to cure things? So what does the diet entail, and how do you pitch that to the patients?
Well, first of all, I think education is really key. Without education, we don't get very far, because as soon as the first temptation, you just throw it out the window. So I spent a lot of time on education, and it's a process, because as we mentioned, there's so many things to learn and relearn, that this is an ongoing thing. Um, I sit down. I have a drawing that I do, that I've done a million times. We've seen 3,000 patients already, so we've done this not a million, but 3,000 times. Where I draw, this is your blood, and these are the cells that need to eat, and we eat three types of foods:
Mm-hmm.
proteins, fats, and carbs. And the protein and it takes me about 7 minutes to say the whole thing. um, and then oh, wait a second, are you telling me to eat fat? Then start all the questions. So basically, what I recommend is a very, very low carb diet, um, with about 5% carbs at most of the total calories. um, and the rest, to be honest, I don't really count. Okay. I actually don't count anything. I just say you can eat this and you can't eat this. I'm not a believer in counting, because I think I wouldn't be able to do it myself long term if I was counting things. I want it to be a way of life. And so I just say, stay away from potatoes, stay away from all sorts of flours, basic anything that you're going to bake with, pretty much. Stay away from fruit. Fruit is candy from nature. Uh, and legumes are also very, very high in carbs. And don't drink any kind of sweet. And then there's a whole part of the education that has to do with sugar addiction, and understanding that we're actually addicted to food in a way. Okay, we think about it all the time. We're compelled to eat all these things. It controls us, and a lot of that has to do with the combination of the seed oils and the refined carbs and the sugar, and that combination, which has been engineered really by the food industry, which is the other part of what we haven't touched upon yet. But the food industry has spent a lot of money in trying to get us to be addicted to these foods, right? So we're told to eat and snack at all times. We're basically hijacking our pleasure centers, and are unable to say stop to this madness. So instead of eating real food like meat and chicken, fish, eggs, and things that don't really come in a package, we end up really eating mostly junk, to be honest. That's what, if you look at what people eat, I mean, a huge percent of food is not really food. So,
no, it's a wonderful,
perfect.
it's a wonderful tangent. It's just
bottom
like
line.
how I want to go into every grocery store with a flamethrower and take out the chip and cereal aisle. Now,
It's not
do,
just that.
I do
It's almost every aisle now.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's frustrating.
No, you should go to the back of the store and buy a whole bunch of meat and leave. That would be a million times better.
Well, yes, and actually, you will end up saving money if you're smart. And you won't be thinking about food all the time. So, as I was saying before, I don't. As far as the guidance to the patients, I eat this and don't eat this. So, go to the aisles. Avoid all the aisles. Go to the perimeter of the supermarket. Get your meat. In some cases, you can have some cheese.
How about vegetables? Are you big on vegetables for patients, like low carb types, like broccoli, Brussels sprouts, things like that?
Yeah, for most patients, I am. I don't think, I think that there's definitely some benefit. Sometimes I've seen amazing stories of people turn around their disease when we take away the vegetables. But for diabetics, I don't really need to do that. For autoimmune diseases and much more hardcore things, I think it does. There's really a point there. But for good old metabolic syndrome with diabetes.
And I appreciate that because, that's the thing we talked about. There's not one perfect diet where this food is totally bad or this food is like the best thing ever. That depending on your conditions, whether, especially autoimmune disease, and, I have that myself, and people say or have migraine disorder. There's certain families of nightshades you can't eat because it seems to trigger that, or autoimmune type flares,
Right.
etc. So we've always pushed that, it's very specific to your own individual medical conditions and health needs. But the big picture is that we're getting too much refined carbs, too much processed food. And I, have really been focusing on this last couple of years, and it's tough because you go and I'm like, look at these chemicals in food, and I don't even know what it is in there. And trying to find single ingredient food is so tough unless you're literally getting your stuff from like the meat aisle, the butcher, the vegetable aisle, the farmer's market,
or the forest where
or
you kill it yourself.
Exactly.
No, you kill it yourself.
So that's what we're left.
We have a lot of friends
do you guys
do.
do that?
We couldn't kill
my problem is this. I have killed a deer with a bow and arrow, and that was all great, and it was actually really kind of cool. My problem with hunting is, and we live in a very hunting area of the state of Oregon, is it requires sitting still and being quiet, and I suck at both of those things.
Yes, he does.
So, not a very good predator in that regard.
That's funny. Interesting. Well, I mean, I've never done it, not even remotely. So, but I admire that connection with the food, which we don't have that at all, right? That's really
right,
something that we're
so
removed from.
I want to know, maybe you could condense it from 7 minutes to 3.5. But when you educate, because I know our listeners are going to be eating this up, and what do you exactly say when you
with syrup on it?
You do your little drawing and you show them the red blood cells, and you talk about the protein, carb, and fat, and give them the little macro lesson. How do you explain to them what the sugar is doing to their body, the carbohydrate?
Well,
okay.
I talk more about the insulin, okay? Because what happens is that, so we said the protein and fat don't need insulin, but when we eat carbs, we secrete insulin, and then that brings the sugar into the body. And at that point, the cells in the body use whatever they need to, especially the muscles. And then whatever's left over goes into the liver. And this is a super simplified view of this, but then we only have about 100 grams of space of glycogen, which is how we store sugar. And then the glycogen, but whatever's left over, basically gets converted to fat and gets shipped out into the fat cell. And if you have room to store the extra fat, then you're okay. You're a healthy fat person. And that's about 20% of fat people. But most of us don't have that. And so after we run out of space subcutaneously under the skin, we start putting fat in the visceral area. And once you have fat, visceral fat, it is bad news. That fat is inflammatory. It secretes all sorts of cytokines, and it leads to localized inflammation that then becomes systemic. And this leads to insulin resistance. This is not the only thing, okay? But I'm again simplifying here, but this inflammation contributes, let's say, to the insulin resistance. So what does that mean? It means that now you're going to eat the same piece of bread that you used to eat, but now you're going to need a hell of a lot of insulin to get that sugar in, because there's a resistance. The cell's trying to protect. There's basically a protection here. They don't want to respond anymore to insulin because they don't want to store anymore. So what happens is that health really is a very fine balance between anabolic reaction, anabolic processes and catabolic. So you store, and that's insulin. It's a storage hormone. It's a growth hormone. Or you break down, which is what happens when insulin is low. It's like insulin is the master regulator of these. It decides when the body stores or uses and breaks down. And this is what goes awry. Suddenly, okay, what ends up happening is that your insulin levels start to become high all the time. Whether you eat or don't eat, you have high insulin levels. So you eat that piece of bread, you're going to have a spike in insulin because you're trying to push that sugar from the blood into the cells, but it doesn't want to. So you keep going. The sugar finally goes in. So, hey, I'm fine. I don't have diabetes. But no, you have insulin resistance. So your insulin is high and stays high. You are constantly storing. We lost that beautiful balance of storing and using. We're only storing. So that's what, when people say, hey, I only eat a little bit, I'm still gaining weight. It's true, because they have high insulin. They are gaining weight. And at that point, everything goes, because you have insulin resistance can lead to a myriad of problems. It might manifest as polycystic ovarian. It might manifest as migraines. It might manifest as cardiovascular disease, cancer. It plays a role in so many, in mental disease, so many different aspects of things that you want that insulin level to be as low as possible. And we know that for longevity, it's also key to have really low insulin levels. So the way to restore that is to stop the carbs. You stop the carbs, and then the insulin levels start to go down, and then you restore that balance. And what happens is when the fat cells are really, really full, because you keep bringing in that insulin, and the fat cell actually continues to be sensitive to insulin. So not all tissues respond the same. So it keeps the insulin is high, and the fat cell still responds by expanding and letting the fat in to some degree. And this just makes us fatter and fatter. It's like a positive feedback cycle, and there's no end to it. And then the fat spills over, and those are the triglycerides. And then the HDL goes down, and then the fat spills over into, say, the pancreas, or of course the liver. So when you have fat in the pancreas, it's diabetes, because whenever there's fat, this ectopic fat in any organ where it shouldn't be, the organ doesn't work. So now the pancreas is trying to keep up with all that insulin secretion, but it can't. And then you get diabetes. And that happens in a minority of cases. Most people are walking around with really high insulin levels, but they don't even know it. They might have a little bit of sugar, not pay attention. They might have a little bit of high blood pressure. They have no idea that that's actually a symptom of insulin resistance. They're walking around for years. On average, before a person gets diabetes, you have hyperinsulinemia from 6 to 20 years. It's a long time. I mean, it's a very big range, but it's a long time of just storing. So, long-winded way to explain, but it's very important. This to understand what insulin resistance is difficult. It's very complicated, but it's really important. And they come back and they're like, wait a second, Can you explain that again? Or can you explain it differently? Or they're just, it's complicated. But bottom line, your body is rejecting, it's not responding to insulin. You've stored enough.
And no, that
you
was
don't want to store
excellent.
anymore.
And I wanted you to do that for the people that listen to our show that are not medical, which is the majority of them, so that they can go, oh, I get it. Like and the thing about insulin is so inflammatory that the damage it's starting to do, and that we tend to blame on other processes like, well, the high blood pressure or the cholesterol or the chips causing your heart attack or the smoking. I mean, a lot of it is, I'm not going to say all, but it's really an insulin resistance problem as well. And I think for the majority of diabetics, correct, that heart attack disease, it's because of the insulin resistance, not necessarily because of cholesterol levels. And then we throw cholesterol medications at patients to lower their lipids, when really it's probably the inflammation of the blood vessels tearing apart the lining and then causing the plaques to form inside, correct? Right.
I think it's a combination of things. I think the high insulin also is causing the growth of the plaque. And then there's the oxidation that comes from eating all the terrible oils that we eat. The oils are you know, the macrophage really gobbles up the oxidized LDL, right? You need an oxidized LDL in order to make a plaque. And this oxidized LDL, I think most likely comes from all this new oils that have.
So on that note, on the
around
oils,
for
have
about
you
100
read
years.
and do you believe in Dr. Mercola's theories then on the unhealthy versus healthy oils? Especially, he's basically breaks down so many unhealthy oils in seed oils that people think they should be eating, and really they just need healthy fat, and that not all animal fat is bad.
Oh, well, I think animal fat is precious. I mean, I think it's incredible. And so, I think these are the oils I'm talking about. I think, I mean, I don't know what Mercola is saying, but Dr. Mercola, but I think, I haven't been following him. I'm sure that, I agree with him on a lot of things from what I understand. But the issue is that these oils are not consistent. This amount, we have about, in our diet, about 22% of our calories are coming from these oils, and they were never part of our diet. And we have replaced it. They don't have any nutrition. While if you eat saturated fat, which has been part of the human diet since time immemorial, and is full of vitamins, and it comes with the protein the way it needs to, you can't really go wrong.
Well,
you can't really go wrong.
Yeah, we went to medical school in Saskatchewan, which is the prairies of Canada, and it's fascinating because one of the biggest cash crops there is canola, which is like one of these absolutely satanic oils. But people were sold this idea that it's better than corn oil, and it's vegetable oil, and vegetables are better, therefore eat vegetable oil, which is exactly the reverse. I mean, you should be eating the steak and eating all the fat on the steak. And people just freak out about that when you try to explain it. I've had a couple patients that I've turned over to carnivores, and they feel so good they become like evangelists. Like they're stopping people in the grocery store that from our clinic and saying, "You can't believe how good this is. You have to do." I mean, and it's like, well, yeah,
Yeah, it's true. It's true. I mean, it's just funny, this
Right.
evangelism happens to people.
And the type,
right?
I mean, he goes into
Because
great detail in his book on those types of seed oils and different oils. And some are, because of the different polyunsaturated versus saturated, what types are more inflammatory to the body than the others. And also how they aren't very stable, some of those seed oils, and they break down quickly.
yeah.
Then they cause a lot of oxidation and
Well, it's oxidative
free
stress,
radical
right?
damage to the body. So it's basically becomes a toxin instead of healthy. So, and your point that you mentioned, I loved it briefly about talking about food and how there's a lot of stuff in the food industry, additives and packaged foods, to even just flour and wheat, which the guy I like, Dr. James Dinick, talks about in his book as well, about how it's fascinating, the history of the flour industry in America was basically the push to fortify it with vitamins, because they found that they did this experiment in sheep where they fortified and put vitamins in their food, and then they wanted to eat more of that. So they started doing that. The National Bakers Society or National Bakers of America pushed to get this legislation passed. I think it was the 50s or 60s, to fortify with B vitamins into the flour and then cereals. And then now it's basically made us crave, naturally, your body wants more of that. So we crave flour and refined flour-rich foods, the cereals, and that's why kids want to eat this stuff, because it's sugary, but also because it's fortified, and that's created this. Yeah, it's fascinating.
That's
so
I didn't
he
realize
also
that.
says that flour throughout the world is not the same, so that people can eat flour in Europe and eat a lot of bread that's baked there and not have issues. I've heard this with gluten intolerance, but also with the high levels of carbs and so forth. And I might be getting some of that mixed up. But what is your perception on that, since you've lived around the world? And do you see there's a difference in the carbs, especially the flours around the world, as far as diabetes or in the endocrine world, or no? Okay.
I think by now, no. I mean, I think originally, yes. Okay. And then they do say that, for example, a French baguette, it's actually much healthier than bread that you would buy. I don't doubt it. I'm sure that it is healthier. The issue is, what are you trying to fix? If you're trying to reverse disease, you got to get the baguette out, unfortunately, because it's already, once you have insulin resistance, the glucose is going to turn to fructose and is going to be stored as fat much faster. So you need to
even the
rid
French
of
baguette and the Italian
lot,
pasta
no
has
matter
to
what.
go. There you go. Okay.
Unfortunately, yes. Okay. But it's a sacrifice that is worth making, I think, when you see how much you gain. So it depends. It's a lot about the attitude. So it's about how you view it, and you see the rewards, and then you're like, oh, well, that's also a positive reinforcement. But if we hadn't gotten so sick, then having a little bit of a baguette and fruit and a little bit of pasta in small portions it wouldn't be a big deal. But because we've overdone it, and our poor mitochondria just can't take it anymore, because we're like stuffing them with carbs every 2 minutes, and not just carbs, but like a whole bunch of other junk, these cells are completely stressed. And that, through a very interesting mechanism, decreases the GLUT4 receptor and decreases the ability to bring the sugar into the cell, because it's just not, it's all, again, protecting itself, saying, no, no more. I'm not. The mitochondria just can't take it anymore. And really, when you get down to it, the mitochondria are calling the shots.
Thank you.
So
thank you, Mother, for your mitochondria.
Yes.
I really appreciate you. I'm going to tell a little story of a patient I saw during COVID who was, I saw him as a telemedicine, because everything was telemedicine for a little while. And so I reviewed his chart, as I would do as a good urgent care doctor. And then I started taking notes as I reviewed the chart, because I was aghast at what I saw. So this guy was on, I think his A1C was like 8 or 9. It was wildly out of control. He was on, the multiple doses of insulin. He was on at least one of the new peptides. I can't remember which one. He was on a maximum dose statin, plus the new sort of statin monoclonal antibody. I forget what it's called. Anyways, all of this stuff, like multiple versions of this, of different drugs, already on insulin, plus all these really expensive diabetic drugs. It was about $1,800 a month retail, and his control was still terrible. And my response in my head, because I'm not nearly as kind as you, was, who's the idiot that prescribed this? And so I went back and I looked in the chart, and it was the endocrinologist. It was the specialist that had prescribed this. And I said, dear Lord in heaven, this can't possibly be happening, because there's a very simple way to treat this. He may need to stay on insulin for a while. He's probably not getting off metformin, maybe ever, but there's other ways to go. So this is a long segue into, tell us a case study of somebody like that, because I'm sure you've seen that patient and you've had success. And I know I want to know about that, and I know our listeners do too.
Well, this is fun because this is like my favorite part, getting people off of meds. I First of all, you have to be careful when we get people off of insulin and you're starting the diet at the same time, because suddenly you don't need as much insulin. So you've got to take into consideration what is their A1C at the time, and how quickly they're going to implement the diet, and how how they're split between long acting and short acting insulin. All of these things, a lot of this whole algorithm goes through your head, and then you must lower the insulin. If they're going to go pretty hardcore, then even 50%, you can get rid of the short acting, and they won't need it. Right, the short acting is to cover the carbs in the meals, so you don't need it. The basal insulin you can decrease by like 20 to 30% right off the bat, no matter what. It's really, really important to get or to consider, depends again where you're starting, stopping the SGLT2s right away. So you can get into real trouble with SGLT2s, Farxiga, Invokana, and Jardiance. These medications decrease insulin, but by a very artificial way, by having the patient pee out the sugar into the urine. And by doing this, it lowers insulin levels. The issue is that you can overdo it and the insulin will be too low. And then you almost like create diabetes, a type 1 diabetes condition. Okay, so type 1 diabetes and type 2 diabetes are opposite diseases, right? So type 1, no insulin, type 2, too much insulin. So in type 1 diabetes, you see that you have a situation of acidosis, because let me back up here so that people can understand. When the insulin levels go down, we actually start to burn fat, right? So if insulin is high, okay, insulin is the hormone that stores fat. You cannot burn fat. Only when insulin levels go down, which is why we want to get those insulin levels down, you start to burn fat. Now, if you're burning fat uncontrollably in a pathological way because you don't have insulin, then that insulin gets converted into that fat gets converted into ketones by the liver, which is what the liver does. Part of that fat, so that the fat can access the brain, but it does so in an uncontrollable way. And so now ketones become ketoacidosis because the pH starts to change. This is a pathological condition. In a type 1 diabetic, when you see that, you're going to see the sugar go up. In a patient taking these medications, it's called euglycemic, meaning the sugar stays the same, DKA, because the insulin levels are low. You're burning too much uncontrollably. You're burning fat, getting to that acidotic state, but the sugars look good. So this is a terrible scenario. People end up in the ER. You guys must have seen this many, many times because of this, but the combination with the diet is particularly dangerous.
And just quick note
this
that
needs
I've
to be
seen
adjusted right away.
A couple of patients in the last couple of years decide to throw themselves on their own diet because keto is the new thing, but not consult with their doctor or anybody, and then come in trouble because now they're on too many medications for how they've changed their diet. So consult your doctor if you do this. So yes. Okay, so keep going.
Your doctor, please don't do this on your own. No, so then you've got the sulfonylureas, which are drugs that are, in my opinion, we shouldn't be using them anymore. They actually are very efficient at bringing down the sugar, but they end up burning the pancreas. They exhaust the pancreas. They accelerate the exhaustion of the pancreas. So I really stop them. This is the first thing I do. All sulfonylureas, which there are many, many of them. They're very cheap drugs. They're very useful at the beginning, but they are increasing insulin. What do? They make the pancreas secrete more insulin. Well, as we said, type 2 diabetes is not a lack of insulin. It's a lack of response to insulin. So it's not really, it's again, It's like taking insulin. But not only that, we're actually accelerating this deterioration. So I really stopped this right away. Yeah, that applies to both the short acting, the nucleotides. What's it called? The Novonorm. I'm thinking of I can't remember the American names. Anyway,
glyburide.
Glipizide, sulfonylurea. Yeah, these are anyway, the metiglinides. Anyway, bottom line is that these drugs need to be stopped. Okay, but really quickly. And then you have the DPP4 inhibitors, and you have the as you call it, the peptides. And usually if you can get them, then they can be helpful. If you have a patient with chronic disease for a really long time, then you're not going to be able to get rid of everything at once. What determines how fast you can deprescribe is how long you've had the disease and how badly it's been controlled. And it's kind of like bariatric surgery. That's also what determines how likely you are to reverse the disease. So if you've been a diabetic for 30 years, it's going to be a much harder deal. So a lot of patients come to mind. Actually, let's think about this. I have 2 patients that are coming to mind. One is a woman that arrived to me on 160 units of insulin with the whole lot. She was on everything. She was on everything. Yeah. Today she is on metformin, and she takes a very, very small dose of GLP-1, which is amazing because she was taking everything, okay, plus the 160 units. And this has been a long road for her. It's required a lot of fasting as well as a very carnivore-ish diet. She was really, really sick. She lost 30 kilos, so she lost like 60 pounds. She's fantastic. She's so happy, so grateful. She's feels great. She works out amazing. So this is somebody who has been extremely motivated to be healthy after just gaining weight and being sick and just what happens is the more insulin you take, the less energy you have. You're just storing energy. So you can't function. A mother of work, you just don't have that energy. You can't get out of bed. Okay. So one of the things is, so anyway, this is one extreme. And I can tell you, for example, a young 30-year-old guy, obese, comes to me with a whole lot of medications, but recently diagnosed. So no problem, off meds in 5 minutes, right? So that's the fun here. That's why it's really key to get on this diet ASAP. You don't want to wait. You don't want to wait 2 minutes because you're just making the recovery harder. It works in both cases, but you just the sooner you hit it, the easier it is to reverse. So I just countless amount of patients that have gone through this, and it's really amazing. The key really is to stay on it. That's where the challenge is. So there is an element there that's where the education comes in, and the support, the family support, and the more people that do it with you, the better. Right. That's what.
I mean, it's the really same with anything. If we counsel our patients who are trying to get a clean life and get off drugs, I mean, like, you cannot hang out with the same group of friends.
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
Hello, it's a temptation. Counseling spouses who both smoke. One was really motivated to quit, the other not so much. I mean, it's difficult because you're around that factor that's just tempting. So it doesn't matter what your personal
problem. Personal problem.
I was going to say sin or temptation is not just drugs and alcohol and smoking, but if you're hanging around people that are doing the same thing you're trying to quit.
That's the fun part, the drugs and alcohol and smoking. Yeah. So no,
you need the support around you.
But that's exactly it.
I want to know, as far as patient groups, though, I want to know if there's another sort of patient group that she has, which is high-end athletes who are diabetic that change their diet to low carb. And how easy is that for them to keep functioning? We know a lot of people that
are you talking type 1 diabetics? like athletic type 1 diabetic.
Yeah, there's a total difference. So do you have any, because we hear, oh, how are you going to work out to that level, sustain your energy without carbohydrate? So do you have any of those as patients, and is that difficult, or do they switch over pretty easily?
Yeah. First of all, the more fit you are, the longer it takes actually to adapt. So it is there's a curve there. What we see usually is that there's a little bit of a dip in performance for those athletes at the beginning, and then it actually supersedes it with time. So you just have to persist. One of the things that is really critical in this group is to take enough salt. A lot of people feel weak because they don't take enough salt. And it's really, really, insulin levels go down. As insulin goes down, you lose salt in the urine. So you got to replace it. And if you're an athlete, you need to replace it even more. So that's where the salt and the bone broth are really important.
And is that mostly to keep the blood pressure elevated and then blood volumes controlled?
Not just, yes, in part. Yes. And people just kind of, one of the most common mistakes in keto is just not taking enough salt, and for anybody, but especially
you get actually hyponatremic. Like we went in 1998. We listened to Tim Noakes at a who's like
Ironman
one of the ancient pioneer dinosaurs of this whole movement, and it was at the Ironman conference, and he talked about how even though there's only 1,500 athletes in the Hawaiian Ironman, and they're all essentially elite athletes, other than the handful that get drawn to get in, and they still have had to have at least finished a half iron. There's at least 2 out of that 1,500 that need aggressive fluid resuscitation because they're hyponatremic. So they've literally drank so much water during the Ironman that they've peed out all their salt. But it's the same. It's the same kind of concept. Is that you're sweating a lot as an athlete, your insulin levels are going down, so you're losing it through your skin, and you're losing it through your urine, which is a massive problem.
Mm-hmm. Right. What's really interesting about Tim Noakes, right, is that he wrote The Lore of Running, and he is the guy who talked about carb loading before races, right?
Yeah, he became a diabetic.
You know what happened to him later?
Yes.
Yeah, he switched over, and then did mea culpa. I mean, one of my heroes. I think this guy did an amazing job in recognizing that you actually don't need carbs. But what I think it's or at least what I can see is that you can train in keto, but maybe the day of the race, you're going to need a little bit of glucose if you're doing like endurance training. And you have that metabolic flexibility. You're able to burn fat. So you have, you don't hit that wall, and you can just keep going because you have endless energy, or a lot of energy, all the energy stored in fat that is able to carry you through. So you don't have to be constantly taking sugar. But a lot of people at some point need some sugar, some kind of carb, if it's going to be a really long race. But the training should be in keto. So when you have that flexibility, you know how to access that fat, when most people don't. So now type 1 diabetics, totally different story, right? If you're referring to the type 1, the lean type 1s, it's a different ballgame.
No, that really helps out because our son is an Ironman, and we had talked to him about this, and he's like, dude, you just can't, there's no way you can't have sugar.
And I'm like, you need to train your body to burn fat, man.
Well, but it's the combination. I love it. It's exactly the same thing metabolically of what the U.S. Olympic team does, is where they train in Colorado Springs. So they live there and they train at altitude. And the people that do the best train or live at altitude. The key is not to train. You actually want to train at sea level because you can push your body harder with more oxygen. You want to sleep at altitude. Train at sea level.
That's expensive to fly back home to Colorado every night.
No, but literally they were doing, this is like probably 30-year-old stuff now. They were doing hypobaric chambers for sleeping because that's the most adaptive period of time. Yeah. And then
The hormesis.
you train really hard at sea level, because now you're really building, like, it's that stress relief kind of cycle. So the idea of I have been working out fasted now for almost the last 2 years or so. There's days when you've gone a little bit too long and it gets pretty ugly, but most of the time I love it. You just come home, you're hungry, you got a 16-hour fast, you eat,
That's awesome.
And we could
awesome.
probably do a whole show on the benefits of fasting and insulin, as well as what happens with the mitochondria, and you're right, hormesis and autophagy. So I'm just thinking of that.
Right. No, but I was going to say that you actually, fasting and keto are very, very similar. So it's very different from low calorie.
Right, exactly.
But it's fascinating because this stuff, like when you say fasting and keto are similar, my understanding of the history of the ketogenic diet is it came from physicians trying to mimic a starvation state and keep people fed. So none of this is new. This is all 100-year-old information. We had great information on the anti-inflammatory effects from Dr. Salisbury about 100 years ago about eating meat and curing Crohn's. But yet it's like we've forgotten because it's old news. And if it's old news, it can't be, it's always the new and improved sexy thing that must be better. Well, not necessarily. So.
Right.
So we were talking earlier about how many other endocrinologists are out there like you, and where would our listeners find someone like that? And sadly, you said you're kind of a lone wolf in this field, mostly. Is that right?
I think so. Very few. I've met very few endocrinologists that think like me, I have to say. There are a few in the type 1 world, the children endocrinologists. There are a few, but in general, it's they're not there yet, and it's also very threatening. It's to understand that what we've been saying for so long is wrong or not accurate or doesn't make sense is a very difficult thing. So I think that's why both cardiologists and endocrinologists are going to be the last bastions.
So on a positive note, maybe people could find you on their own, because you are. Tell our listeners a little bit about your company, your business, and the healthcare that you're providing now online, and the company and what that looks like, and if people can reach out to you that way.
Yeah, sure. What we decided to do is basically scale up what we've been doing in the clinic. So we wanted to make it more available to anybody who wants to make this change. And to do that, we decided we built, it's basically a service. And this service has a doctor and a coach that will lead you through this change and get you healthy. So the idea is also to support the primary care doctor, not to work together with them. And we're more like a coach, even though there is a doctor, we're more like acting as a coach, meaning, or like a consultation to the doctor. And so you can find us, we're called ONA for owning, taking responsibility for your health. So it's OWNA.health, OWNA.health. So you can leave us your email and then we'll get back to you.
I love it. And so do patients, can they reach out on their own, but it's in consultation with their physician? So they have to have a physician obviously on board as well that supports this and works together. Is that right, with your company?
Yeah, and if they don't have one, we can find them one that can help. Not it's so as going back to the American system now, I'm learning. I forgot how messed up it is, and and so many people don't have doctors. So anyway, we can help them find doctors.
And
that
is this
believe
this is a cash pay type business? I mean, if this is right
at this point, yes. At this point, it's not covered by insurance.
So ONA.health is where they can find you. I read that you have a book out as well, correct? You want to tell us You want to tell us a little bit about that?
A booklet, you would say. Yeah, no, that was a booklet that we did with actually the friend that I was talking about earlier. She had a nonprofit, and during COVID, we were trying to get the message out.
Yes.
Get your metabolism fixed, because that's what's going to put you at risk. So we quickly put together this booklet, and
I love it.
It still sells for $1 on Amazon. The idea to get it out there and let people know what to do, and it's so simple, right? If you eat meat, chicken, fish, eggs, and salads, your chances of getting long COVID or severe COVID will be less. Just if you look at the statistics, people who really suffered from COVID had metabolic syndrome big time. The correlation is very, very strong. So
I'd be happy to link that. And the name of the booklet is what?
How to eat in times of
we'll
COVID.
Find it.
It's only $1, but we sell 7 billion copies. It piles up. That's right. That's awesome.
Thanks to you. Well, it is for a nonprofit, so we can, we really want to make a difference. We feel like it's something that is always said in this community is once you see it, you can't unsee it. It's so powerful. Patient after patient getting better. You cannot wait to tell everybody. We're like that patient. That's why I was laughing. Your patient in the supermarket.
Exactly.
Yeah, he owns a small business in town. Great guy. And he's like, pretty much everyone at work here is going to end up seeing you to talk about this. And I'm like, okay, like you can convert them yourself. It's really easy. It's not hard. So
it's really easy, right? It's true. It's easy that everybody should do it. No. It shouldn't be.
This has been really great. Love the way you explain stuff. It's going to be helpful, not just for our non-medical people, but for our medical people. This is how you explain these kind of metabolic issues to patients. There's a way to walk them through this and then answer the questions. But, part of the way the system is set up is to see people for 10 minutes or 5 minutes. You get frustrated. You write the script. You kick them out the door. You tick off the boxes to get your, metrics met and on to the next patient. And it just perpetuates the problem.
Yeah. Challenge. Yeah. It's the whole system is messed up. So this is why we'd like to help the primary care doctors deliver better care, not because they have bad intention. Really, I believe that most of the doctors really want to help their patients, no doubt about it. But just like I had no idea, and I'm so grateful to have fallen into this literature. I had no idea. You think you're doing your best and a good job, but it's just
and you get penalized for taking time. I remember back in the day when used to always complain about women talking to their patients longer than men because women like to talk and explain things, and it's time consuming and it doesn't pay. I mean, yeah. So
that's a whole. You talk about me going down rabbit holes. That is a black hole. That one.
And I'm not going to say that some men don't do that as well, because they do. But
I'm a caring nurturer.
The people that want to take time with their patients to do that education and explain or really dive deep. You're right. The group, the system, the way it's set up.
Well, it used to drive me.
Penalizes
it used to drive me crazy, and we need to end on this because of time constraints, and we apologize for that. But it's interesting because I used to freak out. I'd say, look, why don't we have group visits? Why don't we get the dietitian and me, and we put together like a really good presentation, and we make it a little bit entertaining. Maybe we have a couple other providers there. We have a breakout thing. I've done this speech 9,000 times. Let's just do it with a bunch of patients, and the patients can interact. They can learn from others questions, etc. No, we can't do that because we can't bill for that. And I'm like, okay, well then figure out how to bill for it, because this is completely insane.
I know.
When I worked in the Bronx, I did that actually. I ended up doing groups billing. I don't know how they did the billing, but I would just bring all the patients for the same appointment.
It makes sense. I want to do that every time someone comes in with a cold or the flu, and I'm like, I feel like I'd say myself same thing over and over. It's like, no, you don't need antibiotics. This is just the virus. Blah 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 blah. It's the same with anything that you do repetitively. It's like, why not capitalize on that? Reach as many people as you can to impact their health. So
I know. I think my co-founder always says that I started Own a Health because I was tired of saying the same thing over and over again. So we made actually these amazing videos that explain it much better than I do.
All right. On that note, we will end. Thank you again so much. It was an honor to have you with us. Mariela Glandt, Dr. Mariela. Thank you. Well. What I liked the most about her was that she's an endocrinologist and her last name is basically Glandt.
I thought that was. You're gonna have to just throw that in there.
No, I'm just messing with you. What I like the most about her is she's very good at. She's obviously done it a whole bunch of times, explaining not just what to do, but why you should, alter your diet to an ultra low carb diet as a type 2 diabetic.
Which is what all physicians should be doing when they're treating their patients, is taking time to explain things so that they can understand it and try to condense it down into, not a 30-minute lecture, but.
Yeah. But what if we did this with the technology that we have now? What if you had your own YouTube channel and you just recorded your stuff for your patients and said, I'm going to give you the 2-minute primer on this. And then you go home and watch this. And this is what we're going to do. And here's a sheet of paper. I want you to answer these questions. And voila, right. You could save time. You could educate patients in a way that's far more entertaining. And you wouldn't, there's a lot of stuff we could do.
The problems with that. Now, she owns her own company, so it works. If you're in a group practice or in a giant corporation, no one's going to reimburse you. It's time. You're not going to get paid for it.
Well, but they are going to reimburse you, because if you can do the same thing in 5 minutes that took you an hour,
if you could bill for it, yeah,
then you just do it once, and
that's the problem.
There you go.
We're in a system that we talked about it before with James Jordan, that doesn't always necessarily compensate in the business of healthcare for the types of work that really needs to happen to help people. So that's a whole other topic. But love what she's doing and how she explains it. And wow, I just hope that she's not alone in the near future, and that other physicians have the courage to say, yeah, what we're doing is not really working, because we're putting all these people on medications and nothing's
there's
improving things.
There's two, exactly.
Sounds like mental health to me.
You took the words right out of my mouth. You took the words right. So the thing and I alluded to this during the interview, which is, you don't have to be a genius or a doctor. You just have to look around and ask some questions. So if we have all of these diabetic therapies and all of these medications that are now supposed to work for obesity, how come we're drowning in fat people that are diabetics? It's just like we have a mental health crisis. Well, why do we have a mental health crisis? We've got more mental freaking health drugs than anything else. Like, it's time to go, maybe all the stupid shit we're doing to people with tons of pills is actually stupid shit we shouldn't be doing to people. Maybe that's the case, right? Maybe you shouldn't get antibiotics for that cold because it kills your microbiome and it's going to make you more depressed and fatter.
And sadly, we train people to want a pill to make it all go away, right? That's the kind of
it's the outgrowth of consumerism. I mean, that's what it does.
One more pill.
But that's always the question to me. And it really hit me. I gave a kind of a cynical discussion, because I'm never cynical. As a CME several years ago at a hospital that I used to work at, and one of the guys was just great. He was a psychiatrist, super cool guy, had a lot of kind of personal insight. And he goes, if all these meds that we use in psychiatry really worked, and we get new ones every year, then how come I'm seeing the same patients every week for the last 20 years? And I'm like, because they don't work. He's like, yeah, you're right.
Banging your head against the wall moment, right?
It's oh, I know. It's because all the patients come in to tell you how great they're doing.
Yeah, exactly.
So it's time for a paradigm shift. It makes us super happy to be able to talk to doctors like this that are understanding it, yet aren't crazy, and aren't every single pharmaceutical's bad. They're not. You have to have pharmaceuticals. You have to have big pharma that can produce these things. You still need insulin. Some of these new peptide medications may end up being revolutionarily good. We don't know yet. So it's common sense. And man, oh man, did she have a lot of common sense, which just sadly unusual.
Yeah. Well, food is powerful. Food fuels you, but it also changes your body from the inside out, right down to your mitochondria. So let your food change your body and change up your food so that you can change your body and live your best life. That's basically what I have to say. And that's been the theme for the last year for us. And obviously, consult your physician without going. We talked about this in the show. Without going on one of these crazy quick changes in your diet where you impact change for the good, but you need direction on when to get off your medications, because you can get yourself into trouble if you try to do it all yourself without someone watching and monitoring your labs and your vitals, etc. So that's our disclaimer. And on that note, I hope you're enjoying all the new content we're bringing you with our Doc Tales with Cocktails and our live streams on Wednesdays. We're having a great time doing it. Thanks for sticking with us. And also, we hope that you have joined our email list, where you get to be part of some extra fun content that we send out weekly. And if you haven't signed up for that, basically you can send us a note through our website portal at doc@bsfreemd.com and say, hey, I'd like to be in on the secret newsletter.
It's called Truth Serum.
Imagine that. I love it. Would also like to give a shout out this week to a special listener, which we're going to start doing regularly. And this week's shout out goes to Donna MP, who recently commented on one of our Facebook posts that she looks forward to our podcasts. Well, Donna, we can't imagine doing anything else other than producing an awesome show for fun people like you. Thank you for following us, interacting, and letting us know how you feel. We appreciate you, and we appreciate everybody else, and enjoy the comments. So you can be part of the shout out crew every week. Send us your comments, interact on the Doc Tales, and can't wait to see you next time.
It's no secret that medicine is a bit uptight. That's why Tim and I created BS Free MD, to mix things up a little and have fun in the process. Besides, we are having these exact same discussions all the time, so we thought we might as well invite everyone to the party. If you really like us, you can get plenty more and maybe see one of Tim's cool tattoos on our Instagram or Facebook pages at BS Free MD. See you next time.
But we try to keep BS Free MD as raw and real as possible. We can't be held responsible for any medical decisions or discussions had as a result of what you've heard on the show. We know, bummer. But the truth is, we really do care about your questions. So feel free to reach out to us by email at doc@bsfreemd.com.